you have anything to add from the Board of Ed side, feel free at that point. So without objection anyway, the floor is yours, Corey.
Great, thank you. I'm just going to share a presentation I put together here for us for today. So just bear with me for a moment. Just let me know when you guys can all see that.
Got it.
Got it.
All right, great. So, Steve, thanks for kicking things off. Everybody, thanks for being here. We didn't have an opportunity to meet last year, so believe it or not, I'm actually really excited to be here and see some of you guys again. So, one of the things that we usually do, if you guys can remember the last time we had one of these meetings, is we we review the support that we provided to the town of Cheshire, some of the projects that we've worked on, and kind of also where we envision the technology organization in Cheshire going over the next 1 to 3 years or so. This time is a little bit different. I actually had an opportunity to meet with Mr. Papa and Mr. Massiana a couple days ago. And we figured we'd actually, like to, share some really interesting statistics, which Mike Papa will actually review kind of midway through my presentation here. And then, typically, we'll go through some of the budget, the current budget allocations, some of the projects that we have ongoing, and then we'll also review our pending capital funding requests, if that's okay with everybody.
Sounds good.
Cool. So, and because we didn't get a chance to meet last year, I did kind of, extend things a little bit out. So we're actually going to be taking into account for July 1st, 2019, up until March 31st of 2021. And during that time frame, we actually had an opportunity to work a total of 1,872 support tickets. The total amount of time that was spent on both projects and non-project work was a total of 3,685 hours, which equates to, I believe, about 1.77 work years worth of time. We had an opportunity to work on about 28 major projects, and then we have a breakdown of 1,156 hours of time allocated to specifically school-related troubles and projects, and 2,529 hours of town department-specific support in projects. Any questions on any of that?
Nope.
Great. So part of the support that we provide to the town and the schools is a very critical, monitoring service. And the monitoring is of all of the critical network infrastructure for all the town and school buildings. And so, we respond to alarms, at all hours of the day and night, 24/7, 365. And here's just kind of a breakdown of, the time period from July 1st, 2019 to March 3rd, March 31st, 2021. Sorry for my typo there. We handled 471 switch or network switch related alarms, 18 domain controlling alarms. We had 346 uninterruptible power supply alarms. We've had 100 server related alarms, 62 wireless, 66 firewall, and 7 storage array alarms. That's just a high level summary of the types and also the number of alarms that we've responded to over the last year and 3 quarters or so. Any questions on any of these types of alarms or what the monitoring process might entail?
I got one quick question. 346 for UPS alarms seems like a big number. Is that a?
So we have actually, so yeah, it might be, but I would say, we have 77 network closets throughout the town and the schools. So if you take into account, there being, a couple of big storms, even when the power goes out for, more than, a few seconds at a time, we actually get an alarm from the UPSs that tell us that they've, lost power and are now on battery backup. And so those are the types of alarms for UPSs that we receive. So all in all, it's actually, not that high of a number if you actually take into consideration the number of alarms per closet or the number of alarms per, infrastructure rack.
Okay,
I was going to
And
ask,
again,
I was going to ask similarly, Corey,
Sure.
do you break these down by severity? Because obviously with, as you described with the UPSs, if it's just minor power outages or hits, but what about severities of some of the other ones, especially with switches and the firewalls and domain controllers?
So all of these are what I would consider to be a medium to high severity. A low severity, we really wouldn't log in like a report like this, because that means if it was a low severity issue, that's something that would in years past would have been something that we would have gotten an alarm on, but either would have self-corrected or caused no actual functioning impact to the network or the infrastructure. So all of these would be considered medium to high level severity. The UPS is the way that specifically the power, just because that's what we're talking about. The way that we measure those metrics is we actually wait a certain period of time before the alarm actually gets triggered. So if there are things like just a really quick rolling brownout, we don't get flooded with alerts like that. So these are things that would be considered these are things that would be considered the UPS being off of street power for like more than 5 to 10 minutes.
Okay.
Which in that case would probably say hey, there's maybe not just a quick rolling brownout. Maybe this is a more prolonged outage.
Okay, thank you.
So that's how we derive those numbers there.
Well, and all of us apparently were focused on the UPS 346 number, because that's what my question was about too.
Sure.
And then some of it has been answered, but then to follow up on what you just said, Corey. So in an instance where the UPS alarm goes off because of a power outage that only lasts a couple minutes, it wouldn't be included in this 346 then, because that wouldn't be considered a medium or high alert. So the 346 number for UPS is actually much higher, but these are considered medium to high.
Correct. Yeah. And so these would have been alerts that we've actually responded to, meaning, when we get a medium or high severity level, UPS type of alarm, that would typically, we would typically respond to that, log into the device through the management card on the network if it's even available by that point. And we would, try to ascertain whether or not, there's some kind of, improper input frequency, or if there was a hard power loss, and also get an understanding of how much remaining time is left on it. We've had several instances in the past where we've had some power outages that exceed the amount of runtime we have on some of these batteries, and we've actually had some network infrastructure go down for a period of time. And so we typically want to try and give people a heads up if there's going to be any unintended network outage in any area of the network.
And then can you also just touch briefly on the 66 firewall? Does that indicate attempted breach, or can it be other things?
Yeah, so it can actually be a variety of other things. So that would actually be in terms of we have what we call IPS alerts, or intrusion prevention alerts. We also have things like advanced threat protection, which do malware and antivirus scanning of attachments and things that are downloaded into the network. And so we receive threat alerts based on those, but that also includes the very rare occurrence where we have an issue where a firewall might go down or fail over to our second firewall or something like that. So it's kind of it's a variety. There's a portion of our firewall where we actually configure our alerts. We have actually severity levels. There's levels 1 through 7. And then we have a couple of different notification profiles based on the type of alarm too. So the alerting is actually, in when I sit here and think about it, it's fairly complex setup, but it allows us to very very easily get alerts and information for what we need for critical events. So
Thank you.
of course. Anyone else?
Corey, before you go to the next slide,
Sure.
if I may, Steve,
You made, Vince.
so before we switch this slide, so this is the higher level support that includes the schools as well. I just want to make sure that, you know, all the members are clear that the support that we receive from Apex when it comes to, you know, network firewall or switch issues, Apex is responding to those. And you'll see in the next slide, which I'm going to have Mike speak to, we provide our own level 1 support inside the schools. This is not different than what we've explained to the committee in the past. You know, Apex does the level 1 support for the town buildings and staff, and then we have our own school staff that provides level 1 support. So, you know, with that, Corey, you can go on to the next slide.
Sure. Thanks, Vin. So as I mentioned, and what Vin just kind of talked about, I'd like to, you know, have Mike Papa just kind of give a quick, you know, discussion around, you know, what kind of devices the schools have, you know, how many they support, you know, that kind of a thing. So Mike.
Mike, you're muted.
Thanks, Vin. Yeah, I always love to share what's going on in the schools with everybody in this group. I know I don't see you guys frequently enough, but this is just an overall picture of the support tickets that we've had in the school over the last 2 years. Amazingly, this year, only year to date, we have substantially more tickets than we had last year. Last year, we didn't really have anybody in the buildings after March, so that would account for that. So I'd like to just point out a couple of areas of interest. The second line, I don't know if this might be hard to read. It says remote student/parent support. That is what we instituted last year for remote learning. So parents of remote learners, last year was everybody, could just call a number and leave a message, and a tech responds to them. Either we could take over their machine remotely or walk them through it. And we're resolving problems inside of people's homes. As you can imagine, that gets a little bit hairy because now we're dealing with people's home networks and everything else. We're outside of our controlled domain. So we do have all of those tickets, and we're still doing that today for our kids that are still remote learners. A little bit further down in the middle, there's a category called support desk. We also instituted that. That's for teachers that would like one-on-one help in a particular area. They could just put in a request, say, I'm having problems with my grade book, or I'm having a problem teaching remotely with video and a whiteboard. Someone will come and sit with them at a time that's convenient for them and work through those problems with them. So a little bit more than a support ticket. It's kind of like on-demand training for employees, and that has helped tremendously. Sometimes people in a group setting may not ask a question or may feel that they're a little bit further behind than other people. This is more of a coaching, or as I like to call it, more of a counseling session with some of these people who were more than a little frazzled last year with some of the technology we were using. And just a few of the other ones that have actually gone down. If you notice, printers has 135 tickets. We've gotten rid of all local printers for the most part, and have gone all to MFPs, where people print to a print server, then they go to any station and they can release it for security purposes, as well as driving printing costs down. That has worked out tremendously, and obviously it's also lessened our support burden with not as many tickets regarding printing. And one of the other ones that used to require a lot of support is our assistive technology department. We've kind of standardized that and been able to move a lot of kids onto Chromebooks with applications that are cloud-based, also making it easier for us to support instead of buying specialized software that needed to be installed. So just a highlight of the few things that have probably changed, or trends that have changed since the last time we spoke. And as Vin said, this is level 1 support. Anyone in the Cheshire Public Schools enterprise puts in a ticket and we get back to them. But some of these turn into an issue could be a network issue. Maybe there's not wireless service in some part of a building. We then create a ticket with Apex, and then they take it from there. So that's how we kind of dovetail our two operations together.
All right, thanks, Mike. I was gonna question, but you answered my question almost immediately. The burden of handling both students and parents remotely and the complexity of individual networks and firewalls, et cetera, is unbelievably complicated, more so than people would know. So I assume there was some big challenges in 2020 with the pandemic and remote learning becoming the standard. That certainly confirms it. But thank you for your work there.
There certainly was. For your information, during the pandemic, when everybody went home with a device, we also utilized the transportation department. So if someone put in a ticket and was determined that they needed a new device, transportation would drop one off at their house the next day and pick up the broken one. So that's how we kind of kept everybody involved during remote learning, kept our transportation guys working, as well as our techs were providing all of the remote support. This year was a little tougher because we were supporting everybody in school plus the remote people. So yeah, we adjusted pretty quickly. So thank you.
Corey?
Great. Thanks, Mike.
Yep.
Yeah, thanks for that, display there. I know, Mike and I just want to say, you guys and the techs at the schools, you guys do, a phenomenal job. So, thanks for helping us, when we need you guys to, help us troubleshoot, the problems and getting us the information that we need. So
works out great.
Cool. So next thing, we'll just kind of touch on here, is, the major projects, that we completed during the year of 2019. As you can see, there were a fairly significant number of what we consider, major projects, or projects that, would certainly take up, a very large amount of our time. So we've gone from, sort of rebuilding and standardizing, workstation level operating system deployments for both the town and the schools. We replaced a significant number of workstations that were aging at the library, which helped them out significantly. We also were able to take advantage of some E-rate funding to offset a lot of costs in upgrading the school's wireless network to improve capacity in a lot of places that maybe were a bit troublesome in the past. And another one that we worked on, which I'm particularly happy with, was we were finally able to take the recreation department's primary application and move that into a SaaS or a hosted solution, which has actually worked out really great for them. And it's improved their usability, and it's also improved the usability by the residents as well. So they've been super happy with that, and that's one that I'm really happy is finally out of our data center. There was a smaller but more complex project. There was some monitoring systems that were implemented for a generator over at the pool, which we were able to help Public Works to implement. Some internet edge switching upgrades. So the internet edge is something that we kind of what we call everything kind of from our network core up to where we get our internet handoff from the Connecticut Education Network. So there was definitely some equipment in that tier of the network that was replaced. We were able to implement a door access control pilot that actually was done by Jack Kasner at the remote fire stations. He was a pivotal role in helping us to assess and pilot our new door access control solution. We have been upgrading a bunch of our outdated server operating system. As some of you might know, Windows Server 2008 was end of life last year, and so we needed to make sure that we were positioned well from a security perspective, so that all those servers were were no longer in our network. There were some new software features that were released for our next generation firewalls that we were able to successfully upgrade to. And we also had expanded some video surveillance storage to accommodate some longer retention times for the schools and also for the police department. Another big one was we were able to assist the police department and the fire department in forklifting their computer-aided dispatch platform, which used to be New World Systems, and we moved over to what the state police use, which is called NextGen. So that was a pretty large and involved project that we were able to assist them with. And another really big one was our Office 365 migration. This is something that I'll talk a little bit about in the next couple of slides here as well. Our Office 365 migration is something that we were finally able to offload the town's mail to a hosted solution, their email to a hosted solution. And something that we've been waiting for has kind of now been uplifted, where we have the ability to archive some of the messaging through some of Microsoft's other collaboration products, specifically Microsoft Teams. In some of my previous conversations with I think with Sean and Arnett, we had some concerns around not being FOIA compliant, with Microsoft Teams, because there was not a very easy way to reproduce, conversation history. But that has actually since been resolved. And so we look forward to implementing, more cloud-based collaboration tools for the town departments to be able to leverage. We were able to successfully upgrade, the police department's servers. We were able to consolidate them substantially with what we call our hyper-converged infrastructure. It's a very, it's a very reduced footprint, low power consumption, server infrastructure that also has a much higher level of availability, which we've been able to take advantage of in several instances, which has been great. So we're really happy that that's finally been done. We were able to implement some video surveillance cameras over at the Department of Public Works, as well as the Arts Place. I know we had a couple of incidents in those spaces, so we're glad we can we're glad we're able to help deliver some security for those folks over there. Something that's actually we just kicked off our second annual program, is our cybersecurity awareness program. Using something called KnowBe4. It's a product that's out there that provides things like phishing simulations and cybersecurity awareness training content and testing. So we rolled that out last year. We actually just kicked off our second campaign. We were able to also roll out some outdoor wireless, which has actually also aided us in the ability to provide some pan tilt zoom cameras out on the outdoor sports complex over at the high school, which has been good to have. And we've also been able to assist the fire department in upgrading their communications with some of their their volunteer staff by implementing some digital signage information boards in their fire stations to more easily communicate training requirements and things of that nature to their staff. So any questions on any of that?
Pretty extensive list. I congratulate you on that. I know since the last time we met, the door access controls are new. The next gen software is new. I still remember a question that Patty Flynn Harris asked at our last meeting, though. So I'm going to zoom in on that. That's the talking about cybersecurity awareness. Are we making everybody change their password periodically?
Of course we are, and actually, Jim can attest. We actually recently had an outside vendor. I think it was part of our insurance, Jim, if that was correct. We actually had an outside assessment done of kind of all of our existing postures and controls and stuff like that. And I think from an outsider's view looking in, I think we scored very excellent. It's not necessarily a percentage grade, but I think we received a pretty excellent score overall. There were a few small nonconformities that we're working to remediate, but overall, yeah, I think we were able to score pretty well.
Would you regard that as penetration testing?
So we actually do penetrate. Well, so there are two things, and I'll clarify. So penetration testing is a very active and a very intentional attempt at breaking into a network. And then there's something called vulnerability scanning, which is something that is usually done programmatically, not by an individual. And vulnerability scanning is something that's done more frequently. we do actually, we're actually required to, as part of our compliance with our some of our credit card payment gateways for some of the services that we provide, to undergo a quarterly vulnerability scanning assessment of all of our exterior facing services. And they report any nonconformities, and we're required to rectify those before the next scan. Otherwise, it could potentially put pause on some of our payment processing services. So we do that quarterly. We do not typically have penetration testing done. It's something that I'm happy to have done, but penetration testing is usually done specifically for like regulatory compliance requirements, and it's a very active, intentional, and can sometimes be what's the word I'm looking for here? A bit of an imposing process, on the network. Sometimes it can cause, delay. It can cause performance degradation and stuff like that. So we usually try and steer clear of the actual penetration testing and only do vulnerability scanning.
And if it were done properly, penetration testing would be done by yet another outside service.
Correct.
Not
Yeah,
Apex, not internal. It's basically like contracting with an outside service to try to see how deep into your system and systems can they get, and then to flag any of those weaknesses. It's not something that's cheap. Prices vary. It can be inexpensive, more expensive. You kind of get what you pay for. But it is certainly something worth keeping, at least in the back of your mind. I don't think I would do it too often, and I appreciate the vulnerability tests that you're doing for the credit card companies. I can tell you in private business, once a couple of the big credit card companies were hacked, that for the second or third time, security became a huge effort. And the quarterly questionnaire, I'm guessing, is probably at least 40 pages long. But if it was the same when I was there, so we know that's not a small amount of work.
Yeah, absolutely, and you kind of hit the nail on the head there. I think with cybersecurity, right? A lot of people look at the costs and they say, oh, it's a little expensive, but the cost to recover from an incident is is exponentially so much higher than preventing and putting a good awareness program in place and really changing the culture of your entire organization to be aware. So cool. Anything else?
Quite an array of projects. The next gen, how long did that take? Because we talked about that going in for a while, didn't we, Corey?
Yeah, so we've actually had the firewalls in place for a while, but there were actually some significant major version software release changes that happened, and so by way of doing that, we actually had to more tactically pretty much reconfigure the firewalls from scratch to properly implement the new version. So we did do that actually during the summer of 2019, and that all things considered, the actual implementation probably took 7-8 hours of actual time to do the work, but the preparation was probably somewhere upwards of 2 to 3 weeks.
Were there server upgrades necessary too for that one?
No, that was specifically just on the firewall appliances themselves. Yeah. And that wasn't because there was any sort of existing shortfall of the software. It was just that there was a newer feature of the advanced threat protection engine that was released. That was a major version upgrade, and the proper way to do it was because of where we were, because the version that we were on required a full rebuild. So
got it. Thanks.
Yeah, of course.
Impressive list, though.
Thank you. Moving onward. So naturally, project list 2020 to current, a little bit smaller. We kind of had a lot of things, in my opinion, that were delayed because of COVID. There were a lot of things, believe it or not, that we actually were not able to acquire, which kind of forced us to put a lot of projects on hold. There was some capital funding that was appropriated last year for things, like some switches, in some of the town buildings, and I think, some other locations. And with the circuit, the circuit board shortages and the silicon, the silicon, shortages of producing circuit boards. We actually reached a point where some of the equipment was estimated to be somewhere along the lines of 7 to 8 months away. So we kind of decided to put a halt on some of those projects. We're in a bit different of a situation at this point in time. Obviously, some availability of things is, has returned to normal somewhat. I think some of the biggest things that we had difficulty procuring were things like laptops and webcams and headsets and stuff like that. But those have kind of since come back to a bit of a normal availability, if you will. But just to kind of go through the project list that we were able to complete last year, we were able to implement the door access control solution in multiple town buildings. I understand that there's still some some sort of punch list items of things that need to be looked at and improved upon. But by and large, the town buildings are actively using the new door access control solution that we piloted back in 2019. Recently, with the efforts of Arnett and our consultant, we were able to go live with the town's new website, which is very exciting. So thank you, Arnett. We were able to deploy a significant number of laptops to town staff as a result of the pandemic, and also an alternative means of business resumption and disaster preparedness, if you will. So in sort of some discussions with Sean, we kind of agreed that we were going to start looking at deploying primarily laptops instead of desktops where they make sense. We were able to replace all of the multifunction copier devices as our last contract with Xerox ended up expiring this past year. So our primary engineer, Michael Arndt, who was able to work with Xerox and get all those replaced. We did, I'm sure, I don't know if you guys had actually seen this type of setup, but our coveted room 207, we had some new equipment, some new technology installed in there with the new conference table to better improve some of the smaller more intimate meetings in that space. We provided a much larger display than previously what was there. It's actually a TV. It's no longer a projector, which is great. And we were able to implement a wireless video streaming solution to the TV. So anybody that comes in, public, private, whoever, would be able to join the public guest Wi-Fi and actually it'd actually be able to present on the screen for the group that's in there. We did actually some file server consolidation and cleanup, as well as upgrade some additional outdated server operating systems. And when I say outdated server operating systems in this slide, I actually mean there was operating systems before that were end of life by Microsoft, but there are other operating systems that are still supported by Microsoft, but are still considered a bit older. So we're actually up to Windows Server 2019 right now. So we've been sort of going from the oldest to the newest and making sure that everything is on the latest operating system. So we've been upgrading from Windows Server 2012 up to 2016 and 2019. Last year, just depending on the compatibility with the application that we're upgrading. The file server consolidation and cleanup there, we historically had a plethora of different file servers. So years ago, back when we had kind of taken over and done a lot of consolidation of the infrastructure to the town hall, there was historically a lot of file structure, and there were actually individual files and some other file servers in some other buildings. And so, over a period of time, we were able to, consolidate and clean things up, but, not without a lot of difficulty and change to, the way that some of the departments were doing business. And so, I can finally say, with confidence that, we were able to clean up, our file server structure and really consolidate everything, to a much smaller footprint, and really, make efficiency out of, how the town departments were using our file server resources. We were also able to upgrade the town's server infrastructure as well, the town and school server infrastructure, to the same hyper-converged server infrastructure that was installed at the police department in 2019. This has also drastically increased our availability, as well as giving us the ability to actually perform non-invasive security patching and software upgrades, which is a big help for us, because it actually helps us become more efficient. We can do all these things pretty much during the day without any impact to the town or the schools, and helps keep us from having to do all these things after hours, at night and stuff like that. So huge help there. It's also improved performance, in my opinion. While we never necessarily had any server performance issues, I think just overall, our bandwidth and capacity for utilization has certainly increased. So as things start to grow and the network continues to be utilized more, we definitely have the capacity to handle it. So that's always a good thing. Bring your own device kind of remote access implementation is another thing that I think we kind of we had in years past, but with the pandemic and there being I think a lack of devices and accessibility to certain things during the kind of lockdown period, we were able to afford people the ability to access a lot of their files and even potentially some of their applications through personal devices while they were working from home, which was something that we always had the ability to do to an extent, but we were required to make some some changes to account for the amount of people that needed to use it for a certain period of time. And that's something that I'm going to talk about here on my next slide too, because the solution that we're using is while it's still a very workable solution, I'm not so sure that it's the most cost effective and the best choice for the town schools anymore. So we'll talk about that here in just a moment. Another big one, and I'm sure Jim can attest to this one, is we have finally migrated our Munis application to the hosted solution from the vendor. Something we talked about for many years. And so we can say now that as of I think late February, or Jim, when did we move? Was that in December or January? I think it was in December, right?
Late December we started.
Yeah.
The process,
So yeah, late December we started the process, and we were able to successfully get cut over. Certainly not without some growing pains, but it's going to afford us now the ability to upgrade to Munis most current version, which certainly brings, in my opinion, a lot of benefits and efficiencies to the way that we access things, or the way that the finance staff accesses the application, and also from a disaster preparedness perspective, they provide us with remote access agents. So if we were to incur some kind of prolonged outage, we'd still be able to process payroll, make payments to our vendors, and and that kind of a thing. So big achievement there, which is something I'm very happy about. And then another project that we worked on, which and admittedly was not a very large project, but we were able to work with Fire Chief Jack Kasner, and I think Mike, you would also given a hand in donating some Chromebooks to allow for the residents to register for COVID-19 vaccination at the town's vaccination centers. There was some connectivity requirements that we did work, with Chespercott, on providing and stuff like that. So I just wanted to make sure that, everyone, knows that, we had a bit of a part in, helping make some of those vaccination clinics possible. So.
And as long as you kept Jim Jascott happy with the Munis upgrade, Corey, that's the most.
Yes. He's a patient soul. I'll tell you that.
Yeah.
Thank you, Jim. Cool. And before I move on, any questions about any of these, projects? Like I said, I know it's a bit of a short list. We had, there was certainly an uptick in just overall support cases, and some of our projects, did get delayed and put on hold for a period of time. So it's a bit smaller of a list in 2019, but it's still a pretty decent number of projects that we were able to make some progress on.
And I'm presuming most of them are done within the scope of your current contract.
Absolutely. Yep. Actually, that's the only thing I will say is back in 2019, the school's wireless upgrade, that there was some additional out of scope funding for that, and I think that's just because that's how E-rate works. You kind of have to you have to kind of bid on professional services as part of your as part of putting out your bid. Is that right, Mike? So I think you're on mute.
Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah, so we kind of have to bid our professional services, because we might not win the bid, right? So you want to make sure people can
But I think it's a fair statement to say that in our now 10-year-old relationship with Apex, that the vast majority of the work falls under the scope of the contract.
Right.
Meaning the town is not getting hit with unexpected expenses, on a regular basis.
Sure. Yeah, and I think in years past, Steve, we've the way that we've kind of tried to develop our contracts and our strategic plans is that we want to try and provide the most predictable expenditures for you guys, and for all of our clients. And our the way that we develop our agreements is that we like to include all of the initiatives that we intend on embarking under over the course of 1 or 3 years, however long the contract terms may be for, so that, like you said, there aren't a huge amount of unintended costs to the taxpayers. So
Okay, thank you.
yep, of course. So some of the things that we kind of have ongoing and things that we're kind of looking to do in the future, and kind of from top to bottom is we're and I mentioned this before on one of my prior slides, is we're really excited to start leveraging a lot of the other elements of the Office 365 Microsoft platform, using Microsoft Teams and OneDrive. Certainly from a collaborative perspective, but also kind of from a decentralized sort of disaster preparedness perspective. Having things in a sort of access from anywhere type of platform certainly helps, especially in situations like with the pandemic, but just for any circumstance in which the building or the network may be unavailable. We certainly want to plan for the worst, and look to implement some of these things in the near future. We are continuing to provide some ad hoc support on the town's radio system upgrade. I know there's been some significant progress, and they're kind of nearing the end on that. But that's something that we're still relatively involved in on an ad hoc basis. Video surveillance, we've completed all of the indoor in what we call sort of the attached to building deployments for the town and the schools. There were a series of remote locations that were identified several years ago when this project initially was kicked off. And admittedly, there are a number of outdoor remote locations now that have been requested to have video surveillance recording installed at. And so we are looking to regroup with the internal kind of CCTV or video surveillance project team, and sort of look at some of these things. We don't necessarily pretend to be experts on where these cameras should be placed, and how they should be oriented, and what type of cameras there are. And so You know, especially when you're looking at these very niche types of, you know, camera placements, like in these remote outdoor locations, because, you know, while we can, you know, consult and we can sort of provide, you know, the connectivity aspect, you know, the other parts of it to ensure that you're getting, you know, that you're getting the, you know, your money's worth out of, you know, the purchase, you know, are something that, you know, we look to, you know, an outside vendor to provide. And so we hope to, you know, regroup and kind of, you know, kick that project off again at some point, because I know that the police department, and I think some members of the public safety, you know, committee have even asked, you know, some folks at the police department about, you know, where that stands. So,
What kind of areas though, Corey? Because there was a lot of
mhm,
discussion
there
originally
was, yeah,
about putting them all up and down the path, and that
right,
was going to be extremely prohibitive, both cost wise
sure,
as well as infrastructure. So
right.
where are they talking about now?
So primarily, you're right. They're mostly at at the linear trail crosswalks specifically.
The crosswalks.
I think
Okay.
they've had some, not so much parking lots, they're actually on the trail,
Mhm.
but the police department and the detective bureau have been specifically vocal about crosswalks, because there have been, I guess, over the years, a number of incidents, you know, where there have been you know, some collisions, you know, with pedestrians crossing and stuff like
Mhm.
that, where it would have
Mhm.
been very helpful to have video.
Mhm.
So at a minimum, you know, they were very vocal about, you know, asking for those types of areas to be covered.
Mhm.
And outside of, you know, the already, you know, sort of, you know, determined, you know, outdoor locations, which are, you know, like the public parking lots, like Bartland Park, and I think Mixville, and you know, even I think there was another one somewhere else, but the list kind of escapes me at the moment. But yeah, it's primarily, you know, these high traffic, you know, kind of areas where they've had issues, you know, with vehicle break-ins, you know, kind of, you know, pedestrian hit and run kind of, you know, situations and stuff like
Mhm.
that are kind of the most important.
Interesting. Okay. Thanks.
Mhm. Any other questions about that specifically?
Let's go.
Some of the other locations, Patty, were like Bartland Park, McNamara Park. We currently don't have cameras there. And obviously, we have student parking across the way, which is of concern to us, as well as other incidents within those parks. So
Right.
those were included as well.
Cool. Thanks, Mike. So the next piece, you know, that we look to, you know, get started on again is we have, obviously we have implemented a door access control solution for the town. You know, we do have some funding set aside that's already been allocated to, you know, undergo a pilot installation for one of the schools. Mike and I have already met, you know, with some of the folks involved. I think, you know, Mike, Rich Clavette from the maintenance department has also been involved in kind of some of the pre-stages of this. And I think we just need to, you know, get together with them again and sort of, you know, get some pricing for that pilot. And with the ultimate goal being that obviously we would, you know, over the course of the next couple of years, you know, replace the existing school's door access control solution with the same one that the town has, that we're all in one cohesive database. Just some general infrastructure upgrades. These are some things that, you know, I mentioned before. These are kind of just, you know, what we call our kind of, you know, guaranteed to runs, if you will. You know, we have our traditional wired wireless network equipment refreshes. You know, we have a lot of, you know, aging battery backups that are in place in some of our closets, which I mentioned before. You know, our network firewalls are nearing end of life, and so we do plan on replacing those before this calendar year is out. And then there are also some things for what I would consider to be, you know, web security upgrades. And by that, you know, we have some requirements, you know, from you know, I would say a regulatory perspective to provide a certain level of URL filtering for the schools and to the students. And so there are, you know, some other things that we get through our URL filtering and content filtering solutions that, you know, would potentially allow us to begin filtering people remotely if we were to be able to work, you know, if we had to go work from home again. which would also provide, things, similar to like what we have on our firewalls, which are, advanced threat protection, 0-day, viruses and malware exploit protections, and things like that. So that we're looking forward to upgrading sometime this year as well. Our video surveillance, system is it's a fairly large system, right? It's got a lot of capacity to store a lot of video, and those storage appliances that are mechanical, and they do have a very what I would say probably definitive life cycle, and so our video surveillance storage is kind of nearing what I would consider to be its expected end of life, and so as a precaution to avoid any sort of major interruptions with recording and replaying or recalling video, we do plan on upgrading that storage. I believe sometime either the Q4 of this year or Q1 of next year. And then the next thing here is, and this is something that I've sort of been communicating with Sean about, but I've more so been, working with Jack Kazras, the town's, emergency, response coordinator, which is, our emergency, preparedness and our disaster preparedness, as an IT organization, in kind of a pandemic scenario. There's a lot of things that are out there now that we can take advantage of that may afford us a better sort of work from anywhere strategy in the future. I'm hoping that we never have to encounter a pandemic or a situation like this ever again. But obviously there are some efficiencies and some improvements to our plan that need to be documented, and so we've been working to document that. And on the flip side, I'll sort of skip one down just because this dovetails directly into this one. But with our disaster preparedness, one of the things that we had an issue with this past summer when we had the inclement weather, or the hurricane, if you want to call it, is we had two very catastrophic backup generator failures at both our primary and our backup data centers. We incurred, upwards of, 5 hours of complete downtime for the entire town, which included telephone communications. That did not include 911 communications, but it did include, telephone communications for the entire town and the schools. And so as part of, kind of reevaluating, not just the IT infrastructure, but the supporting infrastructure of the technology, Mike Papa has happily, joined me in kind of, assessing, our options for data center co-location. There are a number of what we call tier 1 and tier 2 data center facilities very nearby in the state. And those data center facilities have a much more robust infrastructure that can guarantee, near 0% downtime. And at a cost that is much less than if we were to try and achieve a near zero, downtime or near zero downtime type of infrastructure ourselves. And that's something that we obviously we don't have the bandwidth or the budget to do that this year. Because it is a very it's a major undertaking to do something like that, but we are aiming to start looking at putting some of those costs if it's feasible into potentially next fiscal year's budget cycle, and so part of that DR plan is going to incorporate how we fail over either to a co-located data center, or how we leverage, that data center for disaster preparedness. On a side note, to disaster preparedness, as a result of that security assessment by our insurance company, there were some recommendations to update some of our cybersecurity policies. So I do want to kick off an initiative here. to improve on and implement, some more modern day cybersecurity policies. There are things, very simple as, having a clean desk policy, right? In finance, you should not, leave, you shouldn't leave your desk with, having, any kind of sensitive information, exposed on it. You shouldn't have, sensitive things, brought home in a manila, folder, without being secured, in a location where, either, intruders or family members who shouldn't have access to it can get access to it. And so there's all those things that, take into account, not only, things that were forced on us by the pandemic with working from home, but also, your traditional kind of what I'd call cyber threats, and kind of, how we implement policy to, help position ourselves to be, better protected against cyber threats, if that makes sense. Any questions so far?
I had one question, and this was
Sure.
brought up through the WPCA, and I'm sure Patty can understand the need here. The WPCA, Planning and Zoning, and other boards can sometimes be on the receiving end of huge number or a big number of documents, large documents, cumbersome documents. Under the collaborative communications, has there been any thought to, sort of having a common FTP site or whatever it is, where we can share those documents between applicants and committees, town committees, without, without requiring very expensive printers to print out multiple copies of extensive documents?
Yeah, and actually, I'll say, and I think what you're potentially talking about is like a digital like bindering solution, if you will.
Mhm.
So we actually I'm actually working with another customer on this right now, where we've actually identified a particular product and a solution that does exactly that, where you can kind of collect multiple documents and create what we call like a digital binder, and be able to securely share that with various different parties, without having to have like let's say a town of Cheshire computer system login, right? We could share it with a personal address. They could log in with with their authenticator, and they could grab their digital binder or view it directly
Right.
through their real-time viewing system. So there are solutions out there. If that's something that is a need, I'd be happy to reach out to Scott and the folks over at WPCA.
Well, I just throw that out there. I know I've had some experience with it, and I'm sure Patty
Yeah.
has too. Just seems sometimes a little cumbersome the way we do business now.
Yeah, sure, absolutely, and ultimately the digital collaboration tools, and that kind of initiative is obviously geared towards gaining efficiencies in all those processes. And while Microsoft Teams, SharePoint, or OneDrive may not be the solution to that specifically, if there's a pain point, we have implemented other solutions for various types of customers in different industries, not just in public sector. So yeah, I'd be happy to follow up on a plan to maybe address some of those concerns, Steve.
I think it would be, and Steve, that's an excellent comment, because I think it would be, first of all, one of the efficiencies could possibly be that it saving the time on town staff of emailing documentation to each individual person. That's the first thing.
Yeah.
And also, not every single member of commission would be involved with Teams. So I don't think that's really part of the solution.
Right.
But if that binder capability also gives them better access to, especially I sat in on a planning and zoning, which is why this comment is apropos at this time, Steve. I sat in on a planning and zoning meeting recently, and the quality of the plot
The
plans
video
that were sent
presentation.
it was very difficult, and
Yes.
every person had a difficult time within
Yeah.
their own access to be able to see
Yeah.
information. So I was, yeah, very aware of that. That's a really great suggestion, at least to look into and see
Sure.
what it would take.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks for sharing that. I mean, like I said, we have implemented, a variety of different solutions that sort of achieve, the same types of, solutions. And so, yeah, I'd be happy to follow up on that. Thank you. Moving down the list here, the next thing that, and this is something Jim and I have sort of, had a few discussions with, and that's a digital time and attendance system, or a digital timekeeping system. Back in, I think it was, October of 2019, we, had a meeting where, there were some department heads who were, kind of, still questioning, hey, why are we still doing our time, on paper? And so, we've looked at, a couple of different systems, and we've had some pricing, and I think we've even proposed, some of those systems, in our last 2 years, budget requests in the operating budget. I think they were both removed, thus far. Jim, is that correct?
Yeah, I
those
could
kinda
maybe
got-
just give you a little more detail on that. We put in 51,000 for one-time implementation costs for a system that would be another module in our Munis system for time and attendance. The recurring cost would be about 11,000, and this would just be on the town side only. We actually had a lot of departments that requested our consideration for an electronic system, because right now everything is done on paper. All our timesheets, vacation or time off approvals. This would give them, a little more flexibility to do this electronically, whether it's from their phone or their computer. And there's a lot of, there's a lot behind this too, where they could, approve upon their scheduling electronically, and perhaps keep track of, other types of time off or other initiatives, in more detail than what we have available now. And I think it really was just to get away from all the paper. But it's, it's been tight with the budgets. It's, I think, something we'd all like to do. Just with COVID, hopefully we're on the back end of that going forward. But as people were working from home and we had payrolls to get done, and we had to make sure, payrolls got approved, whether people were on site or not. It just seemed like a direction, that we might want to go to, really, as more of a backup system, really, in case of, people not being able to come into the office. So I don't know when the right time is. It's something we'd like to do sooner than later, but it does have that upfront cost of 50,000. I'm looking at a couple other vendors too that are not Munis, but the problem with that is, we'd have to make sure that the two systems integrate, and so there might be a little startup cost, maybe more internal startup costs. People in my department would probably have to work that out.
I don't know, sweetheart.
I don't know if anybody
Typically,
has any thoughts or.
well, typically, I've always tried to weigh the cost of software against some sort of savings. What's it going to save me? Savings is kind of gray area. Some of it you can calculate in terms of dollar and cents. Some of it is improved customer service, which you can't necessarily put a value on. But it seems to me that the best argument for that software, and it is, to be honest, my first impression is it's pricey. It would seem like it'd be hard to pay for itself. But the best argument for that is, hey, look where the pandemic has brought us, and everybody working remotely. The idea of passing pieces of paper around and dropping them off in somebody else's in basket is pretty old school. So that would seem to me like, a pretty at least one of the arguments anyway towards streamlining that process.
Jim or Sean, I know this came up the other night during one of our budget meetings. Is this something, the software itself, that we could throw into capital and use CNR for, and then just have the 11,000 in operating on an annual basis?
So we certainly could. I can take that. Can you hear me all right?
Yeah.
Yeah, we certainly could. And just to touch on this one, so there were two other items we talked about, which I opted to move into CNR for just that reason. In fact, we'll probably touch on that when we get into capital. That was the server replacement for the Channel 14 system. It's like $8,000. And then the 911 recording system that was $24,000 that the police asked for in the operating budget. So I did move those. And I've talked to Corey, although we do still need to identify those dollars, I think specifically in the capital request. Corey, I know we've met about that a couple weeks ago, but that was the intention. But the time and attendance, frankly, I mean, I was a big supporter of this, and Jim knows I was pushing for this along with the department heads pre-pandemic, even back to the reality that the sequencing of payroll and the very complicated payroll we have to, my heart goes out to our payroll person, because we have very complicated and disparate departments who have to, at different locations, who have to get their stuff in by, noon on Monday, sometimes after maybe a snowstorm on a Saturday, where that payroll, there's a very tight turnaround. So that was one of the things we were really trying to solve. But yes, we could. I didn't propose it there, Peter, at this point, that 50,000. And I agree with you. I hate seeing those kind of one-time charges in the operating budget. For that reason, because money is just so tight. But as this budget was shaping up, I regretfully had to cut that one. I would love to have it back, but I know we have a long way to go to where we need this budget to get in the end. So that's the challenge. So
well, you mentioned the three items, and that's in around what, 80 grand. So you ask for 1.1 on CNR, and there's you've got your 100,000 right there.
Yeah, we.
But I agree with Steve. There has to be some sort of some savings, and I think the savings in this particular instance is the fact that the department heads are a lot more efficient, with their time and energies by not having to, like you say, be approving. And obviously there's some efficiencies on Jim's department staff for payroll to be going through some of that stuff. So.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, and we touched on certainly when we were remote, I mean, in our case, I guess, unlike some industries, we were really, I say, only remote from the end of March until we brought all the staff back in May. I mean, there's certainly some businesses that are still fully remote now. So I think just as it was becoming, if we had to be as remote as we were for those 2 months, those 8 or 9 weeks for a full year, certainly this probably would have come to even more of a head sooner. So, but I do think, and again, I don't know if we mentioned it, but the police department, Jim, correct me if I'm wrong, they have an electronic system.
They do.
We did try to look at whether theirs could be expanded to the rest. And I think, Jim, you said it didn't look like it was a good fit, but I agree that I like to think we can find a solution for less than $50,000.
Yeah.
But
problem is when you import information from another system,
right,
you have to bridge it somehow, and that could take some work internally, at least initially, to set it up.
Right.
And then, I question whether it'll ever work as well as a module in the system that we do have.
Yeah, the quick answer to that is it won't. I mean, that's the advantage that Munis has.
Yeah.
Because they have a plug-in module that will always remain compatible with all existing software. Any third-party software that you go other than Munis, not only you're going to have the initial setup, but you're also going to have the periodic, okay, wait a minute, this isn't working anymore. Munis updated, I need to change this. It becomes a continual maintenance kind of nightmare.
Yeah, agreed.
Fortunately, we've done this for 5 years now using Frontline, And we have time and attendance module as well as vacation and AppleTrack, which is for job applicants to process them. And obviously we do integrate it with Munis. That's how we run our payroll. So we've already done it on our end. So I'm not sure if Frontline was someone you were considering, but it would probably be worth a look at. We've been up and running on that for over 5 years. One of the other hidden costs in there is we did go out and purchase some time clocks. And I'm not sure if that would be relative to the town environment. But at the high school, we have a lot of people that are hourly employees. So when they come in, there's actually a scanner and they scan their badge. And that's how they clock in and out. They could also do it from their computer as well. So
Yeah. I think there's one or two departments that would probably want to utilize some sort of a time clock if we went with an electronic system. But certainly probably not across all departments by any means.
Well, that sounds like some good information. So if we haven't considered Frontline, we should.
No, I appreciate that, Mike. And actually, it's a good segue to another item that I've been talking about, and I know Peter's aware is in my goals and objectives, but you mentioned applicant tracking. We still use on the town side, fully paper-based. You have to drop off, email in your job application, which I feel like is at least 15 or 20 years antiquated at this point. So I very much want to move us forward in that world too, in the HR side. So, if there's a solution that can do 2 or 3 of those, then that's definitely worth considering. Especially if we can piggyback numbers.
Yeah, no, and Mike, thanks for bringing that up. And one of the things too, I'd also throw out there is that the other sort of hidden cost savings by moving to a digital system is the accuracy. I found in some places before that your staff may not be necessarily lying about their time, but an extra 5 minutes here, 10 minutes there is pretty easy to put on a piece of paper, and nobody else is the wiser. And what we found is that by having a physical button that you click and push and that punches your time for you, it's impossible to fake that. And so the sort of the accuracy savings over the course of 3, 5, 10 years even certainly help certainly it grows, if I'm being honest. So and we did actually look at frontline education, Mike. They don't really cater to non-education facilities much. They just didn't seem ideal because they're very specific to like the K-12 and higher ed space. They said that they could technically make it work, but they find it that not many people outside of the education space use them for that specifically. So.
And regarding the police software, I know that was a software that was very specific to public safety, but I think they've just started to break out into the global municipal market. It's just that I don't know how far along they are in that process. I didn't really want to be a startup.
All right.
Cool. So the last thing I have on my list here, and this is something that I mentioned before, is we've had a remote desktop or kind of a virtual desktop solution for many years, and that's something that still consists of a fairly sizable physical footprint within the data center, and with the rollout of laptops and sort of preparing, for, a disaster, having some sort of, SaaS or hosted virtual desktop solution is something that, we would like to replace our current solution with. There are some solutions out there that are extremely cost effective and are scalable, for when you need them, that I really look forward to, talking to Mike and Sean and everyone else about. Sometime in the near future, because ultimately our existing solution is going to need to be replaced, and I really don't find replacing it with more hardware and more physical footprint is as being the right thing to do. And so I'd like to look at some of these offerings that we've used and have installed and in other municipalities and other private sector organizations as well. Moving down to kind of our current capital, expended, our current capital funding, where we stand with our current, budget balances, and what they're, to be allocated to. So, starting at the very top, I mentioned before, we have some video storage upgrades, that are approximately around $70,000. We have our school door access control pilot, which we anticipate to be around or less than $14,000. And then we also have our currently allocated budget for outdoor locations for video surveillance cameras, which was appropriated, I think, back in 2019 for $108,000. And on the tech reserve side, we have some town and school, some wireless upgrades. We have some aging wireless infrastructure that, in some cases are going on, about 7 years old. So we do plan on replacing some of those this year. Our web security upgrades that I mentioned before is in relation to our content filtering and sort of our threat protection posture. We do have some remaining funding available for replacing or upgrading some of the workstations for some of the town staff. And that's something that, we are probably going to look at deploying more laptops, but I think there are some locations where, laptops are not viable, and they do require a smaller desktop. So we will, look to complete those upgrades fairly soon. We have some additional server storage requirements, both for on-site, backups. We have a pretty aggressive, backup retention schedule that, we need to keep, to be able to recover, data for a certain period of time. And so we do plan on adding some additional server storage to accommodate for more backup storage, and also to replace some of the aging backup storage that we have. I mean, some of that stuff is going on 7, 8 years old, from when we initially, deployed our new disaster recovery solution. So we do plan on spending some of that funding on some server storage. And then another big one was we have a lot of, aging, uninterruptible, battery backups or uninterruptible power supplies, which I mentioned before from, my monitoring and alerting sort of, explanation. Some of those batteries are going on, several years old and are in need of being replaced because the batteries are just not capable of holding the same level of a charge or providing the same amount of runtime that they used to. So we do plan on making some replacements and spending some money on that as well. Any questions?
Regarding the battery backups, just a question. If you're in an extended outage, is the battery backup maintaining all components of the network, or is it just maintaining the critical servers, routers, et cetera, and that end users are let's say left out of that?
So it's a little bit of both. So right now, in both the town hall's data center and the police department's data center, we have approximately 40 or so minutes of runtime of no power. So if we were to experience another generator, a catastrophic generator failure after a power outage, we'd have about 40 minutes to dispatch a mobile generator before, the data center basically goes black. The other, remote locations, and when I talk about this $140,000, we've kind of put together with the help of Vin and Mike, we have some key network closets throughout the schools and the towns that we've identified as critical to be able to provide a certain time period of uptime in the event of a prolonged outage, for things like being able to safely dismiss schools early if there's an extended power outage, and be able to communicate with with parents of students for the schools, and then likewise we also want to be able to operate phones, and have some wireless access in some areas of the town as well during a prolonged outage to be able to still serve, some functionality, in the event of a prolonged outage. But, in the event where, we do lose a generator, we're about, we have a maximum in some of those locations of about 40 minutes. Most of them are 20 minutes and less. They're really only there to currently protect from, quick, power blips and unstable frequencies and things like that on the power line.
Sure, and I'm guessing that most of your systems, after so much time, elapsed time being on battery backup, just automatically initiate a soft shutdown.
Yeah, some of them do, some of them don't. There are some systems that don't cooperate in that process, but we do have we do have a sort of orchestrator that reads the battery percentages, and based on what we know the amount of time it takes to sort of shut those systems down, will trigger on its own, so that we do have a graceful shutdown of everything. But again, there's a very small handful of what I would say non-critical equipment that doesn't participate in that process.
And to what extent could we eliminate these costs if, for instance, we were if major parts of the system were being hosted as a tier 1 or tier 2 data center, as you said?
I would say probably a third of the cost of this, would potentially be offset. But, just because of the sheer number of data closets throughout the town and the schools, and the need for runtime in the event of prolonged outage, and mostly because they don't have generators at the schools, they need to maintain some level of communication. I guess you could, in some cases argue, that there are, cell phones and stuff like that, but a lot of times, in some of these, more inclement weather situations, we've had issues, even this past summer, we had an issue where, when the police department's generator failed, we actually were having difficulty, being reached by some folks at the police department because of the spotty, cell coverage. So having some sort of landline, that may have still been available to them, either, at a different town building or something, may have aided in them getting a hold of us quicker. So.
Okay, it makes the need more understandable there. Thanks
for sure.
Yeah,
of course.
Just a little more information on that, Steve. The high school is powered by the brand new generator, which powers about 2/3 of the building. That also happens to be our emergency center as well. So we're pretty well covered in that regard for that building. At the schools themselves, we don't have servers in any of the schools anymore. We really just have switches to get the signal where it needs to go. But those switches are power over Ethernet, which powers our lighting system, the phone system, video surveillance cameras. So we like to keep those closets running as well.
Yeah.
We put the bulk of our batteries in the closet that serves the front office to give them a little more runtime, so that phones would still ring and we could dismiss in the event of a real emergency. So.
Okay,
and
thanks for that.
If I could just quickly add too, and just speaking to what happened with Storm Isaias and sort of what I hope is the uniqueness of that situation. Folks probably remember we have 2 trailer mounted mobile generators, and Town Hall and PD have their own internal generators. What basically happened there is one of the mobiles was already at Highland School, I believe, to be, as we were spinning it up, to be the charging station and separate sort of shelter, if you will, although not for people to stay overnight. And so one mobile generator was there and the other one was at the PD when their system failed. And then when the Town Hall one failed, it was really to have 2 internal generators fail. We had 3 needs and only the 2 mobile generators. So the upcoming capital budget does request a newer generator, trailer mounted, in part just because one of those 2 is really old. I mean, it's like a 25 or 30-year-old generator. I mean, I like to say the odds of 2 standby building generators failing, and for the Town Hall and the PD, and the mobiles being therefore dedicated, is probably pretty remote. But it also kind of speaks to the age of some of the generators we have in the buildings. So something we're very keenly monitoring and trying to improve, again, if we're able to get funding in this capital budget for an additional trailer generator.
Okay.
Yeah, and Sean, just to echo that sentiment, I mean, I've been in Cheshire for 9 years, and that was the first time that I've ever experienced any kind of, prolonged, outage as a result of any generator failure. I mean, those generators, as as old as they are, they've been, pretty solid for many years. So hopefully that was a fairly unique circumstance. So.
And the power is just one aspect of the data center, having redundant power. There's a reason we looked at those co-location services for outsourcing our data center is we can't really provide a climate controlled environment. We can't provide fire suppression or raised floors or multiple sources of power that we would never be able to afford to build a enterprise class data center, which is why they have people that do that and you just rent the space. So kind of weird thing to get your head around is that we won't have any data center and someone else will have all of our servers. But once you get past that, it does kind of make sense.
Yeah, and I mean, between the power issues, the fact that we still have I mean they're still wet, what we call wet pipe, fire suppression system, in the data center. We can't, there are some structural things that would need to be rectified in the old part of the town hall to be able to put some sort of gaseous fire suppression system in there. Because of how, just because of the old construction of the building. So, like Mike said, there are a number of, benefits to moving to a hosted data center provider, as opposed to, us incurring the cost to build out, a data center or multiple data centers that can provide the same level of safety and security to, to the town systems. So.
I agree. There are challenges on the municipal side, and one is recognizing and treating operating costs as such. And there's operating budgets and capital budgets, and they get fought over. And moving to a high-tech data center just sort of moves a good portion of the expense into the operating budget, and it becomes a very predictable item. Not requiring big investments every 5 or 6 or 7 years. So there's a budget benefit to that too as well.
Cool. And lastly, obviously we'll just kind of go over our capital funding requests. So one of the things I mentioned before is we are regularly replacing just some of our core infrastructure. So we have some town and school, network core and edge switch upgrades that we put a bid out for to leverage some E-rate funding. For those of you that are not familiar with E-rate, E-rate's a federal program that affords the town 40% of the overall project costs to be saved and be covered by that program. And so out of the project total of $492,794, E-rate is covering $197,000 of that project. So it's a program that we're very we're always very anxious to take advantage of, because the cost savings are generally fairly significant, and Cheshire is certified to receive 40% of those costs to be covered by E-rate. And so that brings our total cost to the taxpayers down to $295 or $295,666.76. Sorry. So
if I could just,
large cost savings.
If I could just add one piece of information to that, and E-rate's available to schools and libraries. So the cost and the E-rate coverage that's shown here, those are the switches and network equipment that's specific to the school portion of the project. And, Mike and his team, do a great job of identifying the equipment in accordance with the E-rate requirements. It has to be labeled and marked and logged accordingly. Mike, I don't know if you want to add something to that. You unmuted.
Yeah. Just the what it allows us to do more with less money is what it comes down to in the end. So when we applied for this, you have to actually go out and post a form on their website that anybody can bid on, and then it closes, and then you and then you award you award it to whoever the vendor is. We went out just for equipment and professional services to install this stuff. So the prices came in lower than we expected, as well as getting the 40% off. So my total E-rate filing for this year, we're getting back 238,000. So just shy of $250,000 in free money from the government. And it's not a rebate either. It's kind of come right off of the top. We get what's called discounted billing. So simple terms, if the project is $100,000, they bill us 60,000. They build USAC for the other 40,000 to make them whole. But we don't have to shell out any additional money and wait to get reimbursed. So we've been doing this for a while for all of our dark fiber lines that we lease. So we get 40% off from Crown Castle and for our internet service. But every once in a while, when the timing lines up with the funding availability, we're able to apply for what's called Category 2 services, which are network equipment, just stuff that moves signal from point A to point B. So we were able to hit this pretty good this year. So it's nice that we have a little reserve, and hopefully with some additional capital money, we'll be able to do all this work in 1 year instead of having to spread it out over 2 years. So we're still trying to stick to our goal on the switches and the core of trying to stay around 5 years. It's tough. We've already slipped to 6, and I'd rather not slip to 7. So that's why the focus of our money this year is on getting the core and the edge switches upgraded.
All right. Thanks, Mike.
Yep.
Is there an opportunity to use any of the funds? And I know I sent Vinny an email over the weekend asking about creative ways to utilize the American Rescue Plan money, either town side or school side. I mean, if the school side is covered by E-rate and we're getting a 40% reimbursement, for the town side where we're not getting the reimbursement, is there an opportunity? And I guess this is again a Sean or Jim to use the ARP at all.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly something, that we can continue to look at. I mean, there are, in terms of crystal clear answers, I know Jim.
There are none.
Emailing with Martin Heft from OPM, what was it, Wednesday, Jim, of last week?
It was late last week, and
and
he wasn't able to tell me anything yet.
Right, and unfortunately, they're saying we'll be giving you, that guidance you're looking for. I mean, again, we know what the bill says, and we know that generally speaking, it's pretty broad, and it was intended to be pretty, I think, lenient in terms of some of the uses, but because our funds will be filtered through the state and they may attach their own requirements, we want to be sure. And again, OPM was telling us late last week that we should expect something, what did he say, within the next 6 to 7 weeks, which would be just about when we've adopted our budget. So,
of course,
we'll see. I mean, we're going to keep pushing, and certainly there's other sources of information out there that kind of help you one way or the other. But I think when you actually look at the sources, they're sort of interpreting somebody else's interpretation. And, I think unfortunately we'll probably just have to be in a spot where we have to make the best assumptions we can. And, again, in our conversations with at least Senator Murphy's office, the intent was to be, as flexible of funding as they can. But you're already seeing, and I'm sure you're seeing other news stories about other municipalities, they were explicit that you're not supposed to be, not to segue, I know this isn't the topic tonight, but you're not supposed to be using that to offset or to
operate
for mill rate, right, for operating mill rate relief or anything, but you're seeing towns all around us doing exactly that in their budget proposals. So, I like to think we'll find our own balance that works for us. But I think some of these, especially if you can tie them back to remote work, technology, and certainly the school technology needs for future remote, I'm sure you can make that case. So it's a long answer. It's a long non-answer. Sorry.
Thanks.
Peter,
Time will tell.
The data center at Town Hall ends up getting upgraded with E-rate funds because all of the school's equipment goes back to there. So I was able to incorporate that, and that data center and those core switches are the most expensive part of it. So we did get 40% off of those because they're a shared resource. I may be right on the line with pushing those to E-rate funding, but I was confident that we have 8 buildings that the majority of the bulk of the traffic going through there is for the schools, at least more than 50%. So I was able to get E-rate funding for that as well.
Thanks, Mike.
Yep.
Great. So, I mean, with all that being said, you know, that's all I have for right now. You know, I'd like to open the floor for, you know, any questions, comments, you know, from any of you guys of anything that, you know, maybe I didn't cover.
No, I think that was pretty comprehensive. And it seems to me that Apex and Mike Papa over at the Board of Education have accomplished quite a bit since we've last met. I'm really pleased to see all of that progress. As always, I think the challenge, I'm also happy to see that the IT actually is a budget line item now, isn't it, Jim? 10 years ago, you know, IT expenses were bits and pieces all over the budget. Who knew how much we spent? So we have a much better handle on what we're spending now.
They're more consolidated than they were 10 years ago.
Yeah. And I think the challenge, and I've said this over and over again from a municipal standpoint, is, you know, you've got hardware needs that, you know, the hardware has a lifespan to it. As Mike said, and as Troy said, it's 5, 6, or 7 years. The longer you push it out, the more failures you have, but you have to replace the equipment. And unfortunately, with the municipal budget, those kind of things don't fall into the operating budget as they would for a business. For a business, if you know, just for an example, if you had a network that was worth the replacement cost of all the hardware, and I'll use an easy math example. If the replacement cost was 1.2 million, and you expected to, you know, everything to have a 6-year life on average, then you had to budget 200,000 in your annual operating budget. That's just the way it works. Boy, would I like to see that happen. It's sort of funny to me that when we say we're going to use capital non-recurring, well, that's sort of half true. It's capital expense, but it is recurring. But anything, Peter, that you can do to, you know, hit your associates there with the fact that you can't kick this can down the road repeatedly, because it eventually catches up to you. I'll shut up now.
Corey, can you turn off your screen share? It's hard for me to see.
Yeah, and Steve, I think we've done a better job since kind of this committee came together of doing exactly that, of impressing the need to, you know, to keep that recurring capital expense in the budget. So
Appreciate it.
No question. We're leaps and bounds ahead of where we were when we started this group, which was probably 5, 6 years ago. And those small influxes of capital every year that go into that technology reserve fund have been invaluable. Like I said, we slipped a little, nowhere near as much as the point where we were starting from. And I certainly wouldn't want to slip any more, but it's gotten infinitely more complicated. I mean, we now have 4,000 mobile devices in the schools. Every employee and every student has a device. So
I would congratulate everybody on this committee, because I can tell you, Mike, it was 10 years ago we sort of started this group, and anybody with a little bit of technical background would recognize that at that time it was kind of a dumpster fire.
yeah,
I don't know how we would have gotten through 2020 without all the steps that have been taken in the last 10 years. And I do think we're on a very good course.
And Steve, you know as well as I do, as does Peter, that the education of the varying members of the town committee, the town council, has at sometimes been the biggest challenge.
Oh,
But
yes.
we had gotten to the point where they are pretty well educated as to the needs and the value and the importance of this. I don't know, you may still have a challenge this year, Peter, and Sean, but I think most of the town council members understand, and especially when you talk about the Munis system, when you talk about disaster recovery, when you talk about the police department and the health education and safety of the people of the Cheshire in all ways. But it's still a big nugget that you guys have got to sell. And that's the important part.
well, and Steve's right. We are certainly in a much better place than we were 10 years ago.
Without a doubt. Without a doubt. without a doubt.
Wouldn't have been possible for us to go to remote learning in 2 days without this robust infrastructure that we've built out, paid dividends like you wouldn't believe. It was still
Yes.
difficult, but we did a tremendous job educating that many kids remotely.
I have no further questions. If um, Sean, do you have anything else you need to cover here? Or?
No, I think we covered everything that I was hoping we'd talk about. So
I presume that we are going to continue our relationship with Apex Consulting, seeing as they've done such a fine job.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that's certainly something I would support doing. I know the contract is up. I think it's in June, correct, Jim? So we'll
Yes.
start talking, what that looks like in terms of a longer term extension. So
Okay.
we can have those continued conversations.
All right, reach out if you need any help. I certainly support Apex, and I think what the town has done and the relationship between the town and Apex is a model of success for a lot of other towns. And it helps when you have guys like Vin Massiano too that are so tech savvy.
I have Mike. He's the
All right. If there's nothing else, Corey, Mike, Sean, I'll give you one last chance. Otherwise, I would move to adjourn.
In favor.
Okay. All those in favor, aye. It's good
Aye.
seeing you all.
Thanks.
Same here.
Thank you very much, everyone. for
Thank you
taking
very
the time.
much.
Yep.
Everybody be well.
Thank you.